So the book I've chosen to
Yep.
review is Release of the Spirit by Solomon's Pope Shenouda III. I've got a very old copy that actually, guys, if you haven't read it, please do. Let me try and whet your appetite in the book. The book seems to have been written by the Pope in the time that he was starting out, or at least in the early days of his monastic life. So he talks about the release from the limits of four walls at the beginning of the book. And he says, now I'd like to tell you that the spiritualists in the desert or on the mount are different in nature from those in the town. One of the most important boundaries that ties the worshipper in the town is the limits of the four walls. And he talks about how being released from being surrounded by four walls all the time frees not only your body, your sight to see further, but also your spirit to soar in the desert. I'll read you another few verses, but the book is almost the journey in the life of someone who has chosen to live for the Lord and for Him alone, and to be in relationship with Him and Him alone, similar to the verses we were just discussing, to fall in love with the Lord and Him alone, and to have Him as his personal treasure. And as such, His Holiness the Pope was a teacher, a Sunday school teacher, and he reveals, this is one of the few books that he reveals a personal experience that in none of his other books he reveals. He's very careful not to talk about personal experiences. But in this book, because it needs to have that touch, he talks about how it happened one night. And in that happening one night, he gets visited and has a revelation, and he talks about it this way. And I'll just pick up some of the verses. And I know a few years ago we got someone talking about this as well to us. Happened that night, and he says, they dedicated their lives to God. Every minute of their time was spent for that service. They preferred the spiritual service to their main work, and other worldly works were just secondary works. He talks about servants of God, whether in church or out. That night I was in my special room, sitting on my chair and looking at nothing. I smiled, perhaps I was thinking of myself as a servant. Then a strange incident happened. Did I fall into a long dream, or did God permit me to see a revelation? I don't know. I saw a group of lighted angels carrying me on their wings and ascend on high. While I was looking down on the earth, it was decreasing little by little, so that it changed gradually into a small lighted spot in the space of the universe. I listened to the world's noise, and it was lessening, and it changed into a silence. My body became a light, and I felt myself as a soul without flesh. And I saw beside me many swimming spirits like me in the endless space, and also thousands of angels. They were the cherubim with their 6 wings, and the seraphim who were filled with eyes. I heard the voice of the whole rising in a wonderful musical note saying, Holy, holy, holy. I did not feel while I was chanting with them, Holy God the Father, holy His only begotten Son, holy the Holy Spirit. Then I stopped my chanting to hear a holy low tone that has not been heard by anyone before. When I went with strong desire to the source of this voice, I saw before me at a distance a beautiful and lighted city was hanging in God's kingdom, filled with chants and hymns. And I'll jump because I want you guys to pick up the book and read it, and not just listen to me reading it. It's an amazing revelation that he has. And then at one point it says, so we sat alone with the Lord. And he said, all those whom you saw in the servant city had dedicated their whole of their lives to God. Every minute of their lives had been dedicated to his service. Or not so the lives of St. Paul and the apostles, the lives of Moses, the prophets, the lives of bishops, priests, deacons, and also the lives of the saints. But you, my friend, were not dedicated to God and serving the world. All your spiritual service was just an hour or 2 weekly, which you spent at Sunday schools. Then, do you want to sit with the apostles, the prophets, the priests, in the servant city for these 2 hours? I sat shamefaced during his talk, but I resisted my shame and asked, this was an angel, but asked the angel, but I see in the servant city some of my fellows, the teachers of Sunday schools, who served God exactly like me. The angel replied, no, they are not like you. Really, they served for an hour or more at Sunday schools, but they were spending the whole week preparing for this hour. They spent a long time preparing the lessons. means of explanation, prayer for all these, and searching for their pupils' conditions one by one, and thinking of how to repair every one of them besides their visits, and renewing useful methods to occupy their pupils' spare time during the week. And they made some secret services of which you did not know. Thus they considered the spiritual service their main work, and looked at other worldly matters just as secondary matters. I don't mean that they had neglected worldly matters, responsibilities and duties, but they completed them faithfully, successfully. Their worldly job was not empty of the service. Thus God considered them as dedicated men and women. Another glimpse, and this one is quite soul-searching for us as servants, that we need to somehow find the time during our week to follow up our brothers and sisters whom we serve, and prepare for things properly. And it says come up with different ways of engaging them in the service. It's quite challenging. And then later on it says, your going to the Sunday schools was just a weekly habit. As a habit also you prayed with the children and counted who was present and who was absent. You gave prizes to the present children, but neglected the absent ones as if you were not responsible for them. Thus your service was free from love and spirit. You could not deepen in the children's hearts because your words and your behaviour were not from the depth of your heart. The hymns that you taught them were not full of joy's soul. Your prayer with them was not controlled with meditations and humility's soul. Your orders to them were not covered with love's soul. Thus your service has had no effect. And remember, the person that the angel is speaking to is His Holiness Pope Shenouda III. Carries on. Another section further down. Did you ever feel sad if one of them was absent, and feel anxious about him until you met him and repeated to him the lesson's explanation? As for you who serve, did you believe them as Christ had loved his disciples? Were you kind to them? Did your disciples like you also, or did you spend all the time insulting them and punishing them or depriving them of religious pictures and prizes? Who told you that this was suitable for treating children? My friend, man, love is the first foundation of the service. Unless you love your disciples, you cannot serve them. And unless they love you, you cannot become a useful one to them. And different parts of the book. Even if as we teach as well, it reminded me of the way that the world is set up. We were talking about this earlier. The way the world is set up is based on reward and punishment. It's based on if you do something good, you get rewarded. If you do something bad, you get punished. And even the way that we treat our kids, even the way that we treat those who serve, is based on that kind of worldly way. And it shouldn't be. God says that if we trust in Him, believe and love Him, we will be saved, along with other things. He says that we're to have confidence. The verses today were about our confidence in salvation. We're to have confidence like children with their father, that even if they do something wrong, their dad isn't going to throw them out of the house. Isn't going to stop loving them. He still loves them, but says things that they can grow. That's the way we should be treating others. Anyway, I could go into this for a long time. Please read the book. I'll end the book review here.
Can I just say, that wasn't a book review.